Can y'all see that view? Anyway, good morning. Hey. Good morning, guys. How are you? I was thinking of doing this video on my YouTube channel, but you know what? I'm not gonna do that. So remember how I was basically venting about the whole story about Moses and things like that. I basically just wanted to like make another video explaining what I've picked up, not in terms of like the differences between like the movie and what I was actually reading, but in this video it's basically gonna be like all of like the spiritual like type of warfare that I saw in this particular story, right? I know for the most part we all love like a good story, but yeah, let's get into it. So basically these points I noted between Exodus 3 and 4, you know. So my first point, I wrote off that God basically told Moses to like take off his shoes because what he is walking into is like holy ground basically, right? In the part where the burning bush was, right? And we all know that that is how God basically spoke to Moses in that moment. And when I was thinking about it, I thought of it as shoes are basically like man-made. For instance, if you go back to the story of Adam and Eve, right? God specifically made them clothes in what he saw fit. Basically, I think it was animal skins, right? And it was in accordance to who he is. God is clean, right? So I'm sure that in that moment when Moses was walking into the area where he was, he wanted him to strictly be in parts of what God created him to be. So for instance, us as humans, it says that we are woven basically in the secret place, and God has made us fearfully and wonderfully. And I think that in that moment he didn't want the place where he was in to be tainted by something that was made by human hands, you know. Hence why like the shoes is like, take that off because what you are walking into is holy ground. And you know that how humans are just like, I don't know if I can say dirty, but like dirty, right? And we like whatever we do, whatever we touch, it's just not, you know, for instance, like good enough for God, right? And if you look at it, I think somewhere in like Leviticus or somewhere down in the Bible, my colleague was explaining to me that while she was reading, she basically saw that God was creating like an altar basically for himself, but with only the aspects of what he wanted, and which was things that he could only do and he could only taint and what he could only make, right? So I think that's what I got when he said take off the shoes because what you're walking into is holy ground, is because he didn't want what men made things, what men had made to basically taint the place that he was in. Hence why like the shoes, I think for me personally, I thought like it was man-made. So, you know, anyway, point number 2. Oh yeah, and I wrote down hence why he had to walk barefoot. That is how we come out of our mother's wombs, right? It is just like purely us, nothing extra. Like even this that I'm wearing right now, it's just like man-made, you know. So I think that is where God was coming from, right? And then point number two that I noted was that Moses basically was the very same person that was appointed to basically run the whole narrative, or like the whole story that God wanted him to take charge of. Mainly in the Bible, when I was reading through the story, there were 2 men fighting, right? And these 2 men basically was like, oh yeah, who are you to be like basically like our judge and our defender, or like rather a judge basically between them two, or are you also gonna kill us the way you killed the Egyptian man, right? And basically I think in that moment Moses ran away, according to the story, like he just walked away, and that is when like the story came out, the fact that he killed the Egyptian men, right? And I thought of it as in like sometimes God puts the very same people in places where we can be of purpose to him, even though there are other people who think that we might not be good enough, and they judge us and they speak like a whole bunch of illness about us, you know. Same thing as Moses. He was like, they're like, boy, you thought that you're gonna be our judge and defender, you know, and like, who are you, you know? And when people ask like, who are you, and they question you and they say you're not good enough to be in a certain place, God is the very same person who has made us to say that, you know what, I choose you. You are good enough for me, you know. No matter what the world says, you are good enough for me, you know. You are all I need to basically run my purpose on this earth, you know. Like, I choose you. And I think that is the difference between God and human beings, you know. God doesn't need us to basically come with like perfect works in order for us to be chosen, but he chooses us, and then he will change us in the process as it goes. And this is just for people out there who think that you're supposed to be perfect when you come to God. No, you're not supposed to be perfect. He will do the work for you. He will help you, you know. Even in the New Testament it says that we are basically we are not defined by our works. We are not saved just because we do works on this earth. Oh, there's so much wind and some like water droplets. I think it's about to rain. But we are not defined basically merely by the stuff that we do, you know. We are not given grace by our works, because that would defeat the whole purpose. But our grace is basically a gift from God, right? You know, so that is where like I saw this, you know. You are enough when God chooses you. Like, no matter what has happened like in the past, you are enough, right? So that is point number 2 that I picked up. And I think that is like the voice that we should be listening to, you know, because any other voice basically it quiets the voice of God in our lives when we listen to anything other than what God is saying to us, you know. Have you ever seen like whenever you listen to the world, that is where distractions come in, and that is where like you just like get low in spirit basically. But when you listen to God like continuously every day of your life, that is where you like shine a lot, where you become more of yourself, where you're not bothered by other people's opinions besides the one of God, right? Oh, I think I got something on my face. I'll sort that out. Okay, I have to finish this because it's getting quite cold out here. And then another thing that like caught me about the story, right? Before Moses had to go on the assignment that God was telling him, basically to go and rescue his people out of Egypt, right? God basically gives him signs and then tells him that on this very mountain that we are now speaking on, because in the story where he saw the burning bush was a bit further down from where he was, so he just like walked down to like the mountain where he met God basically in that moment, right? And it made me realize that God will always give us some type of sign or like visions in order for us to believe that he will come through for us, you know. Before we could even like see ourselves in the promised land or be there physically, God will make sure that he will tell us step by step, this is how you will know that I am who I am, you know. And so you know what, and I'm sure that is where exactly the Israelites ended up basically, you know, going further down in the story. So yeah, God will basically just like give you signs of where exactly to meet him after he has told you to complete like an assignment. And I think many times you also hear people saying like, oh no, what is the last thing that you remember God telling you to do? hence why maybe you might be feeling disorientated. Is it because you didn't complete like a particular assignment so that you can meet God in the very same place that he told you he will meet you there? Did you complete it? Did you not? And yeah, he's just saying basically to him that this is where you will find me when you're done, and I will also be with you every step of the way. I think he said it was also somewhere in between the verses where he said to Moses, like, my spirit will be with you. That will be your sign. The fact that you wouldn't have like the spirit of fear or just basically lack in that moment when you're going in front of the people, that will be of evidence that God will be with you, or God is with you, So he will definitely give you evidence, and you will know that he is God. And I think that this is also why it's important to basically stay in your Bible, so that you know how to move with God and how to see him in each and everything, and how to apply principles to you so that you can know what God is requiring from you in order for you also to see him. Right? Because a relationship is basically like a two-way street, and also God does everything. It's just a matter of us complying basically to what he is saying, when he gives us a word. Also, what I admired about the whole story, guys, never mind that pipey. What I admire about God is that when he speaks from a point of certainty, right? He says when he concerns himself with his people, people who are enslaved, people who are basically just going through the most. When he concerns himself with it and he says, this is what I'm going to do, he does it with so much surety, because he knows that he's going to execute it. He knows that he will do it with or without the person who's basically like questioning, like, is he good enough or not? He will just do it. He says, I am who I am. That is what you are to say when you go to the people of Israel or Egypt, right? When you're speaking to them, he says when. He doesn't say if. He says when I have brought you out of Egypt, you will know. That is also what caught me about God and this fascinating story, clearly. So when God speaks, I've noticed that he doesn't say if I bring you out of Egypt, or it says when I have done so. When I have done so. He speaks from a point of surety, and that is how like he's the type of person you can trust, or rather not person, but like being basically, or spirit. Yeah. Okay, so then fast forward right in the story. God basically gets angry at Moses because, like I said, he was speaking from a point where like he was only concerned like with how his flesh looks like. So basically when I say that, I mean that Moses was only concerned with the fact that he can't speak properly. I think he had somewhat of a stutter, right? And God basically says to him, like, you are enough, like you are all I need. He didn't say go and take who, but while Moses basically persists on his weaknesses, God basically says, okay, Shabke, I will send you like a mouthpiece to basically speak on your behalf to the people of Israel in Egypt. Who? In this particular case, it was his brother Aaron, right? And also with the elders, right? And then I'm like, you know what? In that moment, Moses could have taken God's word for what it is, but his fleshly human desires like just took over in the moment to say that you better focus on your weaknesses. You better focus on those fleshly desires, because when God says something, you shouldn't be believing it. You are good enough. You are good enough as God has made you to be. God has called you to be, because God basically says to him in that moment, like, who basically makes people like blind or give them eyesight? Who basically gives them like a mouth to speak, feet to walk in? Who basically wakes you up in the morning? Is it not God? And that should have been his moment to say that actually I am enough, because why God is calling me to be in that place, and that is only what God requires of me, and he basically just like, what, he didn't listen to God in that moment, and he just wanted like he just wanted to what do you call it, he just listened to like his own weaknesses, you know. But then God was like, okay, sharp, fine, I'll just send you with your brother and the elders. Sharp. Point. And then another point that I realized, that while God was angry with Moses, and then this basically goes hand in hand with what the Bible says about being slow to anger, you know. And basically God was angry with Moses in this moment, because like, how could you question me? Are you not seeing that you're talking to the very God who has like protected you and your ancestors all this time, you know? Or do you not know who I am, you know? While he's angry at that, he doesn't like, what do you call it, he doesn't like act out as humans would. He was basically like slow in his anger, and he came with resolution being that he basically sent Moses with Aaron and his and the elders. And I think he did understand what Moses was saying, and he does understand and sympathize with Moses weaknesses, because it is of concern at times, you know. For instance, me personally, sometimes I also feel like if I had to walk in a room, would I be able to say like or speak professionally and whatnot? And there are some moments where I'm just like, oh. But then I am so glad that God has me, and he always reminds me that, you know what, Kate, I will learn, I will teach you, I'll help you, you know. In any room that you enter, you will learn, you know. And it's not gonna take like immediate, what do you call it, it's not going to be like of immediate effect that I will be able to do so, but it will take time and patience. But you know what, God sticks to his promises. If he says he will do something, he will, you know. So yeah, this is just like another significant point that I noted, that God is very slow to anger, and he comes with a resolution, you know. And I remember there was this one time where like my colleague, we were talking, she said to me that she was reading, and God was basically like, you know what, take your people and go with them, you know. And then I'm just gonna be like, because why, your people are stiff-necks. And I think that is also him trying to contain himself and keep his composure, because why, people can make you angry in this life. And I think God experienced it like a whole lot, you know. So people can make you mad, but like the important part would basically be that you keep your composure, and you like don't react out, you know. Your anger or like your feelings that you have towards a situation, it is not what matters. What matters most is how you basically react on them, you know, how you act out on them and things like that. And this is also something that I needed to learn, as you guys have like listened to like my other previous videos. Nonetheless, I just have to go back now. I just wanted to quickly make this video, and you guys, like, it's a very interesting story to go on to. So if you have noted some other points, also if you went through like the very same story, please go ahead and comment and tell me, you know, because this is just like all of the interesting points that I noted with these particular chapters, right? You know what, yeah, so yeah. And then if you would like, you can also no, it's fine. Also subscribe to my TikTok. It's called Let's Try Again 2 dots Kate, you know. I'll just put it down at the bottom below. Yeah.